All right, this is the weekly update for Mr. Fix's science class for the week of November 18th. Okay, so on Monday, we did the Force of Motion slide deck 1.4, and we had 3 activities that went with it. Then on Tuesday, we did 1.5 slide deck, and again, we had 3 activities with it. And we finished it off on Wednesday with the strength and velocity change with the sim. So let's take a look at that real quick. Okay, so students had to use the sim to do various missions, and for each mission it told the students what the goal was. So they had to exert a force that would hit the target at that velocity. Alright, so depending on the initial velocity, so the initial velocity was given in the data table, and so with that, then you had to exert a force, one force, and so with this one you had to exert a force in the opposite direction. I think it might have been 5. Let me see. There we go. And so then they had to analyze the data and see what strength force they did. So that's a 50 strength force in the opposite direction. It caused a velocity change of 5. And so they had to record that data. And so what they basically had to do is figure out the relationship between the amount of force strength and the change of velocity that the object experiences. So basically, the greater the force strength exerted on the object, it caused a greater velocity change on that object. All right, and then they had to use a modeling tool to explain how the different changes of velocities happen. So for each of the velocity changes, they had to determine which force and direction and strength caused that velocity change to happen. So but they had to figure out, well, what's the velocity change to begin with? So here's the velocity before the force, here's the velocity afterwards. So basically it was decreasing speed. So to decrease the speed, basically they had to exert a force in the opposite direction. And the second velocity change is much greater, and so it had to cause that greater velocity change, you had to have a greater, stronger force exerted. And then finally, the final velocity change was even a greater velocity change, so you needed a even greater force exerted on that. All right, so that's 1.5. Then 1.6 they did as well. And then they also did 2.1. And then they added to their notebook. All right, so these are the things they added to their notebook from those lessons. They added the key concepts and key terms in there, including page 20, starting chapter 2. So we did that. Then we did the book and paper challenge. With the book and paper challenge, they had to use a book and paper, and their challenge was to drop the book and paper so that they hit the ground at the same time, and there are multiple solutions that achieves those goals. So the constraints were that they must be let go at the same height, at the same time, and they must be dropped, not thrown, pushed, or tossed. And so then they had to explain why their solution worked. So we did that Thursday, and then on Friday, they used a modeling tool to explain more in detail how their solution worked. So basically they had to drag these arrows that represent force, strength, and direction, and these labels to label what the force was earth pulling, was air pushing, was book pushing, and were they exerted on the single piece of paper or the book. And so they had to compare the velocity changes of the book and the paper, and then explain what strength, combined strength and direction of the forces that caused that velocity change to happen. So that's basically what we did this week. Hope you have a good weekend. Bye-bye.